Why did you become a politician for?
I suppose the thing that happened was just the time in which I was growing up. So you just kind of heard, I grew up halfway between Liverpool and Manchester. So when I was one, my dad got a job here. And so we moved to the Lee area, and that's where I grew up. And through the late 70s, early 80s, it was just a case of looking around at what was happening. And particularly, I always reference the miners' strike because that did loom quite large. I was at school with people who were affected by it. And I was just starting to ask more questions. And one of my most vivid memories is watching Boys from the Black Stuff with my mum and dad and sort of asking them about it and saying, why is this really happening? And so I just kind of was becoming, I guess, more politically aware.
Do you think, looking back on your political career as an MP, did you make a difference?
The biggest, I guess, that means the most would be Hillsborough. If you talk about that period. I mean, I was growing up through the 80s. I remember the Toxteth Moss Side situation in the early 80s, the miners' strike I've mentioned. If there was one thing that kind of radicalised me the most, it was Hillsborough. My kind of experience of being in Westminster all those years is I couldn't do enough. It was often of frustration. I was there, MP for Lee, with all of the needs that Lee had. I was in the chamber all the time, biggest town without a railway station. What's coming in to replace the mines? Where's the investment? And it's often like you were just talking into the abyss, really. And, the system, so London-centric in its ways, just doesn't listen. You can make as many speeches as you like in there. So, yes, I made a difference. And yes, I guess climbed the greasy pole down there. But in the end, I did realise that Westminster wasn't my natural habitat, and actually it isn't set up to support places like Lee.
A lot of people said you're the best Labour leader Labour never had. You stood twice. 2010, you were one of 5 candidates. You finished 4th. 2015, you were the favourite, the bookie's favourite, which is always a curse. 2014 at the Labour conference, you got 3 standing ovations. Everyone tipped you to be the next big thing as well. You ended up losing to a guy called Jeremy Corbyn, who got 59% of the vote and came from nowhere. Why do you think you lost?
I think because I represented something that had gone deeply out of fashion, and that is, I guess, compromise politics. So the truth of the matter is, if you want to make things work, you have to kind of come out with things that can be quite nuanced, and you have to reach out a bit, don't you, into the centre. I mean, I think as we're seeing at the moment, if you kind of adopt quite black and white polarised positions, you're not going to move things forward.
You've always described yourself as a working class lad from Lee. Do you think that held you back at all in Westminster?
Definitely. The place doesn't welcome accents. It doesn't, nor does the national media down there. David Blunkett warned me about this. He says you won't get the same opportunities. You won't get called to speak in the same way. You won't, and it's true. The old networks down there of people who went to certain schools kind of work for them still,
What was the reason for you turning your back on life as an MP?
I mean, I suppose it was that whole experience, wasn't it, of kind of living through those years. As I say, Westminster was never my natural habitat, and I kind of tried my best within that world. But I guess what people outside of politics may not realise is that people inside it get disillusioned as well, as much as you do. And, I tried to live that world and make it better by sort of championing things that mattered to me. But by God, it was hard to do it. Hillsborough was the exception, not the norm. That was to the establishment down there. That was one that got away maybe. Whereas the other issues I was trying to prioritise that mattered to people here, you just couldn't make headway with them. So I really thought long and hard about it. Then when I recognised that the devolution deal had been done and this position was being created, I felt, well, that is the right role for me. And I don't know whether you feel this, but I do. I feel this is the right role for me. I feel finally this is something that I can really invest everything in because it's about us, isn't it, rather than anybody else. It's about people who live here in the Northwest, and that's what matters to me.
What have you done as mayor?
So it's 2 years. There's quite a lot of things I can point to that I believe represent real progress. So on homelessness, I said that would be a top priority. I personally believe that, until you can do something about that, the most immediate problem in front of our eyes, I think, why would people have confidence that you can do something about anything else? We are now running a scheme called A Bed Every Night, which on an average night in Greater Manchester has got around 300 people who are being supported in shelters across Greater Manchester. Another thing that I said I would try and do is do more for young people. So from September, we're bringing in a free bus pass for all 16 to 18-year-olds. Okay, that's not in yet, but it's coming. And to me, that is something that will change a lot of lives here and actually will build our economy as well.
I just want to go to 2 weeks into the job. We get the terrible news that there's been a bombing at the arena. Where were you when you found out?
At home, I was watching Newsnight. I'd just come back from playing five-a-side at Culcheth High School with my brothers, which was kind of a bit of a dividend of my new life, which I wouldn't be able to do in the ordinary night. And I'll be honest with everybody, I genuinely didn't know what to expect, really, when I came in here in the city centre on that first morning. And I think, people will remember it. The place was stunned, wasn't it? And it was a kind of jittery feeling, wasn't it, around everywhere. It was kind of bright, cold day and quiet. And I think everyone was just, it was like a very uncertain, sort of palpably uncertain mood in the city. And bear in mind, I'd never had experience of this. I mean, in Westminster, you don't get to make decisions like that. Do we gather people for a vigil or not? No, Richard had long experience of that. And I was kind of saying to him, I was getting all of these calls because people were texting me saying there must be a vigil, and he and I debated it quite a bit. We were at police headquarters for most of the day. And we took a decision around about 1 o'clock to do it. And looking back, I think that was the best decision that we made because it wasn't about us, actually. And Richard said to me, no political speeches. We never, and rightly, the kind of sense of solidarity. It was amazing, really. It was awesome in the true sense of that word. Awesome sort of power of the place came through. And so that's, when you ask me how did Manchester react, that is what I would point to. And that reaction obviously was kind of felt around the world, wasn't it? I mean, people saw that and it meant something in that moment.
What are you doing about transport? What are you doing about transport?
Honestly, I mean, well, this is not going to help you, is it, when I say I'm as frustrated as you are about it, in that, I mean, one of the problems is I don't run everything, but people think I do. So if you look at my Twitter in the morning, I get, well, everything from roadworks to trains to buses, and I wish in many ways I wouldn't mind being held to account if I had the power to do something, but I don't. So now I think we've got to begin a journey that London went through when they got their mayor in 2001. Yeah. And if people will remember, London had a dysfunctional transport system, and slowly now, with the arrival of Ken, then Boris, then now Sadiq, they have brought order through each of those mayors, I think, to what was a chaotic system. And all I can say to you all here is that is what I want to do. We need a transport system here that is basically run, all of it, by TFGM, that is integrated, that is affordable, that has things like a daily cap, like the Oyster system in London. That's where we need to get to. I want GM Rail. That's, let me put my cards on the table for you, give you something very specific. So there's a review of franchising going on at the moment. I'm going to make an argument that the GM Rail services, the commuter services, should be taken out of the Northern franchise and run effectively by Transport for Greater Manchester, so that we can integrate that with Metrolink and make this system work as a sort of single commuter system.
Spatial framework, is that doable?
It's more complicated than Brexit. I think that's a second mention there, but that may be the last. It's complicated, isn't it? Because it can't just represent my views. It's a process that is.
What are your views?
My views are we've got to stop building for the car. We should be brownfield first. We should be focusing on revitalising our town centres. We should be building more homes closer to public transport. But I recognise that we need to build more homes. And therefore, if you do all of the things I've just mentioned, you still will have other difficult decisions that people may not like so much. So my update, you asked me for, is that we put a rewritten spatial framework out earlier this year. I would argue it was radically rewritten, as I promised, where the green belt take was reduced by over half. You will see a lot greater focus on town centres as a result of that. And as a result, higher density development, which I believe will be also therefore more affordable development rather than, big homes on the strategic roads for well-paid commuters. I think we need to be building more affordable homes in town centres. Has it gone as far as I would like? Well, if I'm honest, I'd have liked it to have gone further. I personally would have liked to reduce the Greenbelt take even further. But we need to get this thing done, because the thing I need to do for all of you is give the outside world and investors certainty about where Greater Manchester is going. What's the plan? What's the vision? What's the plan to deliver it? And that is my job. And if I kind of fudge all of this and let it drift on and on and on, then I won't be doing my job for the businesses of Greater Manchester. The thing that I focus on most is the train stations. So over half of our train stations are not wheelchair accessible. And we recently put 10 forward under what they call accessibility for all. And the government gave us not even the ones that we prioritised, they gave us 2 minor grants. It's a product of, and let's be clear, under all governments, neglecting to invest in the northern transport infrastructure. This is why, under devolution, we asked for full control of all of our rail stations. Because actually, if we had them under our control, we would build more properties close to them, on top of them, around them, in line with what I was saying about the spatial framework. And we would then use the money that comes from that investment to make the stations themselves more accessible. Westminster is built for a 2-party system, really. So exactly. I mean, so if people are moving away from it, what happens then to national political structures? I mean, that is a real question. We need substantial political reform in this country. And I would argue now, devolution, it's got to be a major part of that reform. Because the thing about devolution, and the thing that is very different for me doing what I do now compared to what I used to do. For me, when I get out of bed every morning, it's about the place, isn't it? It's about dealing with the issue that was just raised with me about disability access. It's about getting the transport system sort of beginning to make this thing function for you all, and the homelessness issue. It's about here, isn't it? And what we care about. And the thing about that is, it's by definition a unifier. I think we're seeing the beginnings of the breakdown of the 2-party system. And the answer to it is not just more and more Westminster solutions to deal with it. It's actually just to sort of say, right, this is a moment to really push power out and down into the English regions. So using the freedoms that we have got as Greater Manchester, we have been running a debate locally for the last 2 years. We've had 2 Green Summits now. So as part of that, we are saying 2028 in the spatial framework as the date where all development here is going to have to be zero carbon. So other places aren't saying that. We've got a position of a ban on fracking, because we don't think fracking is the future in any way, shape or form. And we're pretty much the only city region that is doing this. We've made a bit of a start, but I'd be absolutely ready to be challenged to go faster. But we have set 2038. The UK is on a path to 2050. And I think what we're doing here might kind of put pressure on others to pick up the pace a little bit. Business needs change, don't they, over time? And lots of businesses will want. They don't just have to be distribution businesses to want proximity to the motorway network. So, Rishi's right to say that. I mean, we are trying our best to get these things into balance. I think one thing that people may not realise is the fact that we are doing this as Greater Manchester in the spatial framework rather than our 10 councils all trying to do it alone does bring real benefits for councils like Bury. So Bury have got a lower housing number, so have Trafford, so have Stockport, because Salford and Manchester are taking some of the growth. So you kind of, you kind of share within, if you like, and you do it more as Greater Manchester. You get benefits from doing it in that way. But you're absolutely right. I mean, there are still, we need some big strategic sites in the city region. We're in the process of agreeing a local industrial strategy with the government. I don't think I'm breaking any big secrets to say the sectors it will prioritise will be advanced manufacturing materials, graphene and all of that, health innovation, number 2, digital and tech in all of its guises, number 3, and low zero carbon number 4, to go back to the last question. The way I describe it is, if you think of media city, sports city, airport city today, we need material city, health city, tech city of tomorrow. You see what I mean? And that's what the spatial framework in some of its allocations is trying to do. It's trying to create very big strategic sites for future industry linked to the industrial strategy.
Andy, thanks very much to Slater Heelis, first of all, hosting today's event. They organise this event, I think, about every other month. It always prompts really good thoughts and conversations, and some great people in the room today. I'll just ask you, because we are out of time, put your hands together for Andy Burnham. I think he's answered every question.